Medusa was born unlike her immortal sisters, Athena and Euryale. Immortal among monsters, she was a striking contrast to the fearsome Gorgons. Her beauty was spoken of in whispers across Greece, or radiance that could rival the gods themselves. She dedicated her life to Athena, the warrior goddess, swearing the sacred oath of celibacy and servitude. The temple of Athena, a sanctuary of wisdom and war, became her refuge. She found purpose within its sacred halls, tending to its fires, whispering prayers beneath its towering columns. The echoes of her devotion filled the space, a mortal's voice lifted in reverence to an immortal power. Within Athena's temple, she discovered solace and certainty. Her days were filled with worship, her nights adorned with quiet contemplation beneath the flickering torchlight. The temple was not just a place of faith, it was her world, a realm untouched by mortal corruption. Here, she believed herself safe, shielded from the greed and cruelty that lay beyond its marble walls. Her faith in Athena was absolute, her dedication unwavering. But beauty, even when pure, was never without its dangers. It was a gift, yet also a burden, one that invited both admiration and envy, reverence and obsession. The eyes of men lingered upon her, their whispers drifting through the corridors like a gathering storm. Priests and warriors alike stole glances, entranced by the mortal priestess who walked among the divine. Even the gods, who dwelled in Olympus above, were not immune to her allure. Though she sought only to serve, she was powerless to escape the attention that followed her. The weight of desire pressed upon her, and seemed but ever present, growing heavier with each passing day. She did not yet understand that her devotion and beauty together had painted a target upon her back, one that no mortal hands could erase. What had been a life of sacred worship was slowly unraveling into a fate she could not control. The whispers of men became murmurs of warning. The world beyond the temple walls grew restless, its hunger seeping into the sanctity of the goddess's domain. And in the looming shadows, the gaze of a god settled upon her, a gaze that would alter the course of her fate forever. One fateful night, Poseidon, god of the seas, entered Athena's sacred temple. The air thickened, the marble floors cold beneath his feet. Shadows stretched along the towering columns as the god advanced toward Medusa. His presence was an unspoken force, overwhelming and inescapable. The temple walls bore witness to her cries, the flickering torches casting fleeting glimpses of a struggle doomed to silence. No divine hand intervened, no celestial force shielded the devoted priestess. When the chaos subsided, silence reigned. The sanctuary she had vowed to serve had become the scene of her deepest betrayal. Medusa lay broken among the marble and ruin, the weight of desecration pressing against her soul. The temple, once a place of refuge, had offered no protection from the cruelty of the gods. The violation of Athena's sacred ground was an offense beyond mortal comprehension, a crime that should have summoned the wrath of Olympus. Yet, the heavens remained still, the stars indifferent. The gods, it seemed, did not punish their own. Instead, the victim remained abandoned beneath the unblinking gaze of the statues that lined the hall, a silent audience to her despair. When Athena arrived, her presence was a storm of divine fury, but her rage did not fall upon Poseidon. No thunderous retribution struck the sea god from the skies. No words of solace were offered to the one who had suffered. Instead, the goddess turned her gaze upon Medusa. Cold judgment replaced the warmth of once cherished faith. The mortal woman, powerless against the will of an immortal, found herself the target of divine wrath. There would be no justice, only condemnation. Athena's voice rang through the temple, a decree of punishment rather than protection. Medusa, defiled and discarded, was no longer fit to stand in service of the gods. A curse would be her fate, a transformation irreversible. The betrayal was complete not by Poseidon alone, but by the goddess she had worshipped with unwavering devotion. And in that moment, the world as she knew it crumbled into nothingness. Medusa's punishment was swift, cruel, and irreversible. The golden locks that once framed her face twisted and writhed, hardening into a nest of venomous serpents. Each strand hissed with fury, a grotesque reminder of the life she had lost. Her delicate features contorted, her skin hardened like stone, and her eyes glowed with an unnatural, deadly fire. The transformation was agonizing, her cries swallowed by the vast emptiness of the temple. She was no longer the devoted priestess of Athena, no longer the mortal woman whose beauty had drawn the eyes of gods and men. She had become something else, something feared, something reviled. Athena stood before her creation, neither pity nor regret etched upon the goddess's face. There were no words of comfort, no gestures of remorse, only judgment remained. "No man shall look upon you without turning to stone," Athena decreed, her voice echoing through the desecrated temple. With those words, Medusa's fate was sealed. A curse, irreversible and absolute, had replaced her humanity. She had not been granted justice, nor had Poseidon suffered for his crime. Instead, the victim bore the burden of the gods' cruelty. The temple that had once been her refuge now cast her out. Stripped of her purpose and cast into the shadows, Medusa was banished to the desolate island of Sarpedon. The island, shrouded in isolation, became both her prison and her sanctuary. The ocean waves roared against the cliffs, mocking reminder of the god who had destroyed her. The wind carried whispers of a past she could never reclaim. The cries of the innocent girl she had once been were silenced beneath the relentless hiss of the serpents that now crowned her head. Alone in exile, Medusa wandered the ruins of her former life, each step a reminder of what had been stolen from her. The island's silence was unbroken, save for the rustling of her snakes and the distant crash of waves. The world had cast her aside, labeling her a monster before she had ever become one. But as time passed, her sorrow hardened into something else, something unyielding. If the gods had made her a monster, then a monster she would become, not in shame, but in defiance. Alone in her exile, Medusa became more than a victim. The curse that had once shattered her existence became her armor. No longer the helpless priestess, she was now a force of nature, feared and untouchable. The men who sought her had warriors, kings, and self-proclaimed heroes never returned. Their lifeless forms stood frozen in eternal defeat, scattered across the desolate island of Sarpedon like silent warnings. Fear became her weapon, solitude her shield. The girl who once prayed to Athena for protection had become the very thing men feared most, an embodiment of untamed power. Yet even in her isolation, questions haunted her. She listened to the whispers of the wind and the crashing of the waves, searching for answers in their ceaseless song. Had Athena truly cursed her out of wrath, or had she bestowed upon her the only protection she could? The thought gnawed at Medusa's mind. The gods did not punish their own, nor did they grant mercy without reason. Could it be that the transformation had not been meant to destroy her, but to free her? Perhaps Athena had not forsaken her after all, but had instead given her the only weapon she could, a shield against those who would seek to own and destroy her. The world beyond her island continued to spin, but Medusa no longer belonged to it. She was a legend now, whispered in fear by those who dared to speak her name. The myths painted her as a monster, a terror lurking in the shadows. But the truth was far more complex. She was neither villain nor victim, she was reborn. In a world where men took what they pleased without consequence, Medusa had become the consequence. Her very existence defied the order of things, a challenge to the gods and mortals alike. Perhaps the Gorgon was not a punishment, but a form of divine justice only the world refused to see. Where men had power, she had certainty. Where they had violence, she had vengeance. And though her heart still carried the weight of all she had lost, she would never again be powerless. The gods had cursed her, but in doing so, they had also made her untouchable, and in that, Medusa found her strength. Perseus came armed with a mirrored shield and a blade blessed by the gods. He did not face Medusa, he faced only the reflection of what she had become. Deception and divine intervention guided his hand as he struck, the battle over before it had even begun. Her end was swift, her fate sealed. As her head fell from her shoulders, silence swallowed the island, but life did not simply vanish. From her spilled blood, Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, the golden warrior, emerged new legends birthed from her destruction. Even in death, Medusa's existence defied oblivion. Her severed head, still bearing its terrible power, became a weapon even in the hands of those who had sought her end. Perseus carried it across the seas, using it to turn enemies into lifeless stone, wielding the curse she had once borne as his own advantage. But her journey did not end with him. The head of the Gorgon was gifted to Athena, the very goddess who had condemned her. In an act both cruel and reverent, Athena placed Medusa's image upon her shield, the aegis, a permanent emblem of terror and strength. The woman she had once cast away was now an eternal guardian, her power bound to divine will. Yet Medusa was never truly gone. The stories twisted her name, shaping her into the villain, the monster, the horror lurking in the shadows. They stripped her of her pain, her past, her humanity, leaving behind only the image of the serpent-haired fiend. But those who looked deeper saw something else. She was not just the victim, nor merely the monster. She was the warning, the reckoning, the consequence of gods and men who believed power was theirs alone to wield. She was fear, but also defiance, carved into myths so that she could never be forgotten. Her legacy endured, far beyond the hands that struck her down. She was no longer a woman, no longer even a being of flesh and blood. Medusa had become something greater, an idea, an unyielding force. A reminder that power, even when cursed, could never truly be erased. The gods had made her a monster, but history would make her immortal. Thanks for tuning into the past. Don't forget to subscribe and join me for more stories that shaped our world.